Welcome back to the southern Botswana town of Jwaneng, host to the 2023 TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race. Last week we brought you the first installment of our desert race coverage, and now it's time to tell the remainder of the story. Join us as we go through the action, proudly brought to you by the SARRC in association with Toyota, Ford and Pirelli. The desert race has always been the big one, the crown jewel in the Southern African Rally Raid Championship. This year the event's full name is the TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race, and the event was back in Botswana for the first time since 2019. And back in Jwaneng since last visiting in 2018. Last week we showed you where the chips fell after the Pirelli qualifying race, as well as the first full day of racing in each class. This week it's time to bring you the conclusion of the 2023 Desert Race, as we take a close-up look at the action from Jwaneng. But first, a quick reminder. The TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race is round 3 of the 2023 SARRC. And due to its status as the only true marathon event on the calendar, the Desert Race offers 1.5 points of the normal SARRC events. As such, it is a pivotal race in the season and comes not only with the added points, but also the bragging rights associated with the toughest automotive event on the African continent. Let's pick up on the action where we left off last week, starting with Class T1. When the dust had settled over the tough opening day of the 2023 Desert Race, it was the names of Eben Basson and co-driver Leander Pienaar who topped the standings. The pair had a small but meaningful lead over Johan and Sean van Staden, who trailed the Team Hilux pairing by just about 4 minutes in their Renault Duster. Johan de Bruin and co-driver Gerard Schutte were in third place in the Redline Revo, with Jaden Els and Alvin Vonk in fourth, and Daniel Schroeder and Ryan Bland rounding out the top 5. As the late great Murray Walker would have said, anything can happen, and it often does. We caught up with Basson prior to the start of the final days of racing in Jwaneng.
Yeah, we're fortunate where we are. We're happy. We had a good run yesterday afternoon. We made up some bit of time there, so we just have to keep it there now.
Up until just a little over 2 years ago, when the Class T1 Plus cars arrived, these, dare we call them normal Class T1 cars, were the pinnacle of the sport. The same car that won the Dakar in 2019. And these are also some of the best drivers the country has to offer. So although Class T1 might not be the premier class anymore, the battles in this class are world class to say the least. And speaking of world class, drivers like Daniel Schroeder and Class T points leader Nick Pienaar are indeed world class drivers. But unfortunately for them, their desert race aspirations were cut short when both crews were forced to retire from the final day of the 2023 event. Gerard and Rooney Heinlein were classified 7th despite surviving a few mechanical issues in their Redline VK56, and were no doubt happy with finishing their first ever Toyota Desert Race. But perhaps not as happy as Dutch teenager Pim Klaassen, with local lad Wade Harris reading the notes in the Redline VK50. After experiencing gearbox troubles the day before, the young Dutchman had to find his way through the field in order to record his first ever national race finish on African soil. And speaking of a finish, the two Blickno brothers from Witbank, Fouchier and Battis, have made quite a name for themselves since joining the sport only just more than a year ago. The Team Hilux Rally Raid squad has been fast, but good point scoring finishes have been hard to come by. And after rolling their Hilux during qualifying 2 days ago, it seemed like a finish would once again avoid them. But the pairing drove well, especially on the final day, to record their first ever desert race finish in a fine 5th position. Round 1 winners Johan de Bruin and Gerard Schutte started the final day 3rd in class, but the Redline Revo crew had a determined young Jaden Els in their rearview mirror for most of Sunday of the race. The youngster with Alvin Vonk reading the notes in the King Price Extreme SVR is as fast as they come and started the day with the brain firmly in his sights. What followed was a great battle between youth on the one side and life experience on the other. On this occasion, it was the youth of Els that triumphed over the Pretoria businessmen, Els also claimed the Road to Dakar prize in the process, but more about that a little later. Believe it or not, but the scrap was only for third place, as the father and son pairing of Johan and Sean van Staden found themselves in no man's land for most of the race. No man's land meaning they were too far ahead of third place to be challenged, and too far from the lead to challenge for a win themselves. Even so, the old dog brought their Renault Duster home after 3 grueling days and 1,000 kilometers through the Kalahari Desert to claim second place in Class T1. And you clearly don't have to be a rally raid expert to work out how things panned out at the top of the standings when the flag was waved to indicate the end of the race. Besides a few flat tires along the way, it was a near perfect weekend for the Team Hilux rally raid crew of Urban Basson and Leander Pinot. The pairing won the Pirelli qualifier, ended the Saturday in the lead, and extended that margin to a full 10 minutes at the end of the race. An emphatic victory for the defending Class T champions in Botswana. There it is, the official Class T1 results after 1,000 kilometers of racing through the desert surrounding the town of Jwaneng, with 10 minutes the winning margin for Basson over the Van Stadens, with Els and Fong claiming the final spot on the Class T1 podium. The Brain just missed out on a podium, with the Blicknose claiming 5th. It's always a great time to celebrate a podium finish, but nowhere else is it as special as here in Jwaneng, in front of thousands of appreciative fans. The taste of victory must have been bittersweet, especially for Urban Basson and Leander Pinot.
And it's awesome to be a crowd like this, and the guys are supportive, and it's just crazy now. It's nice to see how these guys have the spirit for the racing. It's awesome.
In Class T of the SARRC, only 3 cars took the starters' orders for day 1 of the desert race in Jwaneng. But by the time the sun set over the southern mining town, that number had reduced to just 2. As Bernard and Minette Johnston in their Neil Woolridge Motorsport Ford Ranger fell by the wayside. This left Hendrik Du Plessis and co-driver Heinrich Du Plessis well in control of the class in their Ford Ranger, with Skalkberger and Henk Janssen van Vieren lagging by 31 minutes and 30 seconds in their King Price Extreme Volkswagen Amarok. With the desert race being a proper marathon event, it is possible to take a hefty time penalty for not finishing a leg of the race and still record points for a finish at the end of the event. And this is precisely what the Johnston couple did. With a 20-hour penalty, they were never going to fight for a win. But when the luckless Skalkberg and Henk Janssen van Vieren encountered a broken input shaft in their King Price Extreme Volkswagen Amarok just 90 kilometers from the end of the grueling race, the Johnstons' determination were rewarded with a second-place finish. This meant that father and son Hendrik and Heinrich Du Plessis took a flag-to-flag victory in their Ford Ranger, after taking the lead on Friday and staying out in front when the checkered flag was waved. Time to celebrate not only reaching the end, but to do so from the podium in Jwaneng.
To win it on your first go, it's a special thing, especially when you do it with your boy as well. So yeah, nice one.
And this is what Class T standings looked like after the completion of the 2023 desert race, with the Du Plessis finishing at the top ahead of the Johnstons, with the names Berger and Janssen van Vieren unfortunately disappearing from the leaderboard. 3 of the 7 Class G cars that started the desert race had been sidelined after the first full day of racing. While some of them would start again on the final day, only 4 cars remained in contention for overall victory. At the head of the field was Jeff Minott and Newsem co-driver Rodney Mumbles Burke. The pair had a 16-minute lead in their hydropower Can-Am Maverick, with Glenn Theron and Craig Galvin in second place in their Motonetics machine. Ewald van Rensburg and Johan Skeppers were just over 13 minutes behind the third-placed crew, while Ian and Van der Mostert found the going tough, but still held on to 4th place on the table. We had a chat with Class G leader Minott prior to the start of the final day of the year's desert race.
You know, it was tough yesterday. It was what side-by-sides are made for, lots of tight, twisty stuff. So from that point of view, it was great.
Minott, as well as the rest of the remaining Class G crews, had their work cut out for them on the final day of the Fiat TGRSA desert race. These little cars are both quick and tough, but 1,000 kilometers through the Botswana desert race can be even tougher. The rate of attrition was high, with the desert claiming several Class G victims on the final day, including Ewald van Rensburg and Johan Skeppers, as well as Francois de Witt and Pierre Jordan. In the end, the Mostets, with son Ian playing the chauffeur for Father Vanna, took their 10-hour penalty for failing to finish on the Saturday, but reached the end of Sunday's proceedings. The Motornetics racing crew also claimed the final step on the podium in the process. It was a good race in the end for the Motornetics team, as their second car, the one in the hands of Glenn Toron and Craig Galvin, finished the race in a fine second position after a relatively event-free run on the Sunday. And what a fairy tale for Jeff Win It in a Minute. The old dog came to Botswana with an experienced but new-to-him navigator in the form of Rodney Mumblesberg and never looked back. Despite a few issues here and there, the hydropower equipment Can-Am was never troubled throughout the whole weekend, with Minute now adding a flag-to-flag desert race victory to his long list of achievements. He was happy, to say the least.
You know what? It's such fun out here. Today was like the old barber spawn. It was just amazing. Beautiful route, beautiful spectators, great organizers.
The Class G standings tell a story in its own, with only 3 crews classified as finishers following 1,000 kilometers throughout the desert. Minute topped the standings ahead of Tehran and the Mostets. This brings us to the crews fighting it out in Class A of the SARC, where the harsh Kalahari brush had taken its toll on the field. Only 2 cars officially made it onto the results board, with John Thompson and Maurice Matten showing their class at the top of the standings in their Zaka Challenger. Their nearest challengers were Lourdes de Prier and Junior Vardy, piloting the Farmers Meat Striker. But Thompson's lead was just over 2 hours, and all the experienced crew had to do was finish the race.
There's not much I can say. I love the desert race. We've always enjoyed it. Botswana, the spectators are absolutely phenomenal.
This was the final day of the 2023 TGRSA Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. The name is a mouthful, and trying to manhandle one of these Class A special vehicles on narrow sandy tracks through the bush can be a handful. On this occasion, the test proved too tough for no less than 4 of the 7 Class A starters, with locals Mohamed Noor and Ahmed Hussein failing to reach the finish. The same could be said of both Andrew Makaneta and Eugene Bierman. So a finish on the desert race came with a guaranteed podium position. But in what order? For once, defending Class A champions Timmy Howes and Gary Campbell would not be in a position to fight for a victory, as they so often do. Howes took the 10-hour penalty for not completing the Saturday's part of the event, but fought back on Sunday to finish 3rd overall. A finish in itself is worth a lot in the desert, so Lourdes de Prier and Junior Vardy would have been satisfied with their 2nd place finish, even though a few niggles in the desert prevented them from joining the fight for the lead. The Class A lead, however, was never in question, with the veteran pairing of John Thompson and Maurice Matten dominating the event in the Zaka Challenger. It was a solid performance from the crew over all 3 days of racing. The special vehicle category also consists of less but still powerful and fast Class P machines. The desert took its toll on these machines, but after 1,000 kilometers of racing, there were 2 crews classified as finishers of the renowned desert race. In first position, the CRT of Quinton Lessing and Brendan Smith, who completed the race in 14 hours and 25 minutes, comfortably ahead of the crew who claimed 2nd place, Khalil Hussein and Andre Caldenes. And these were the official standings for Class A and P at the end of the desert race. The names of John Thompson and Maurice Matten remained on top of Class A, ahead of du Preez and Vardy, with champions Howes and Campbell collecting the points that came with 3rd. Lessing and Smith took Class P, ahead of Hussein and Caldenes. Time for the experienced crew of Thompson and Zamatin to once again enjoy the sweet taste of victory from the top step of the podium. Something which they've done several times over many years, and something that a racer can never get tired of.
It's been a lovely weekend. We really have enjoyed it. The Botswana people are amazing. The spectators here are just probably the best in Africa.